Okay, what is up everyone? So if you remember this bit from the 4.7 patch notes, it says there are unconfirmed reports of new fighters sneaking into this update. These reports are now beyond confirmed because everyone and their grandmas are posting screenshots of these new variants everywhere. And this is probably also obvious to many by now, but these fighters can also be viewed on the catalog. So, for this video, I will pull up these new variants and give my first impressions based on all the information I have been able to gather up till now. So, before I start, I have two very important reminders. Alright, reminder number one, these variants are AI only. I asked a dev just to be sure, and it's dev confirmed, okay? There is no chance of you getting any of these variants from any kind of relic just yet. So do not open relics if the main purpose is to try and get lucky and pull these variants early. It's not going to happen. Okay, reminder number two. This discussion is going to be based on their signature abilities only. This only paints half the picture of how a fighter will operate in a practical setting because we are not sure of their base stat distribution just yet. This will become more evident later as I discuss. So let's start with the first of the three variants, Vintage Virtuoso. He's a fire type natural silver big band variant. His signature ability is called Classically Trained, and it gives him one stack of precision every 20 combo hits, and precision hits grant enrage and inflict guard break for 5 seconds. Okay, take note, this is the level 1 form of his signature ability. So when these signature abilities are maxed out, the precision is gained after only 10 combo hits, and the enrage and guard break will last for 10 seconds. Okay, so obviously just reading the signature abilities, you can tell that this big band is meant to be used for offense. Okay, like there's literally zero defensive utility here. So what happens here is whether or not he ends up being worth investing in is going to be totally dependent on what his base attack is going to look like. Okay, so I asked Melon, who, if you watch my last video, you'll remember Melon as the resident Skullgirls mobile big band expert. Okay, and according to Melon, it's hard to tell right now, but Vintage Virtuoso might end up being a stat clone of either Resonant Evil or Troublemaker. So this matters a lot because Resonant Evil's base attack is somewhere like below 6,500, which is absolutely terrible even with access to Enrage. And Troublemaker is a bit more redeemable at around 7,500, which is, you know, according to Melon, could put Vintage Virtuoso on par for offense with the likes of Heavy Metal and Robocopy, which is, you know, for an offensive big band is very much respectable. But I'm pretty sure this big band is not going to be outperforming Epic Sax anytime soon. Okay, so yeah, we gotta curb our expectations on that one. Though I will say he looks very fun to use because, you know, he rewards long combos. So yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say about Vintage Virtuoso for now. So let's move on to the next variant. Okay, next up we have High Ruler. This is a light type, a natural gold parasol variant, and her signature ability is called Sovereign Seal. So the first part reads, opponents have their blockbusters and tag-ins disabled after 3 seconds while near a tier. So the second half reads, detonated tiers inflict curse and hex for 5 seconds on hit. Dark fighters also suffer stun for 3 seconds. Okay, so this is pretty nuts. If we're just looking at signature abilities here, right? So, you know, this is all we have as a basis right now, but she's looking pretty nuts. This is crazy. So she has meter control, and she also has tag in disables. So just a refresher on AI behavior. When the AI has a lot of debuffs inflicted on them, the chances of them tagging out are just really, really high. Okay, so you just, sometimes it doesn't matter, right? If you give them space, all of the debuffs you work so hard for, they just disappear because they tag out. She eliminates this opportunity just by outright disabling the tag-ins. And then to add to that, she can also inflict Hex and Curse, which are two very, very powerful debuffs. I do think they are arguably the two best debuffs in the game when it comes to shutting down defenders. Hex and Curse. And the fact that she has access to both is pretty insane. So in addition, this is just the level 1 version of her signature ability. So when you max out the signature abilities, the blockbuster and tag in disable happens 1 second. Okay, they don't have to stand near a tier for 3 seconds. It's just 1 second at max when it's maxed out. And for the second part of the signature ability, the Curse and Hex will go up to 10 seconds, which is pretty crazy. The stun stays at 3 seconds. Okay, man, yeah, she's pretty good. She's like, the base stats are just, her base attack is just going to tell us if she's going to be good or amazing. She can't be. I don't see a universe where she's bad. This is such a good signature ability. It's crazy. So, okay, on the matter of base stats, Melon also did tell me that High Ruler, based on the fighter score, is looking like a stat clone of Princess Pride. Princess Pride, fully evolved and max leveled, has a base attack of 8,500. So let's just go with that assumption for a bit, just so we can, dive deeper into discussion here. So let's pretend that High Ruler does have Princess Pride's base attack of 8,500. Yeah, she won't be as crazy. She won't be as crazy as, like, looking at the signature ability in a vacuum, but she still will be a very, very good, like, utility counter pick. Okay, so yeah, 8,500. Honestly, it bumps her down a notch. So if you guys were paying attention to the Silver Big Band discussion a while ago, I was talking about 7,500 being respectable. So why the double standard Princess Pride with 8,500? That's a full 1k attack increase. So why would this be a bad thing for High Ruler? It's simply because Somersault and Primed exist. These two top tier offensive parasols, their damage numbers are insane. Okay, and if High Ruler ends up having 8,500 with no damage boost outside of critical mass, yeah, it's gonna be tough competing on the damage end, right? She's going to be, like, I do think, relegated to like a utility counter pick role. She's not going to be like a top tier full on sweeper, especially when the teams get really, really tanky. And take note, the powerhouse of her signature ability is, I do think, the Hex and the Curse. I do think that is what makes her really, really powerful. Like, the fact that it's Hex and Curse at the same time. But having to detonate your tiers when you kind of want your tiers in play to keep critical mass online, it could further bump down her peak damage output. So what about defense? Light type, relatively tanky stats, assuming it's a stat clone of Princess Pride, 67k base HP. Nothing to scoff at. It's pretty good. Light Catalyst synergy. And if you give her a moveset wherein she can just spam, like, you know, dumping tears all over the place, it could get annoying, right? Because your tag-ins and your blockbusters are going to be disabled. However, I do think that's kind of not enough to make her spooky enough on defense, right? I don't see her being very, very scary on defense, even with that kind of utility. I still think you'd want to use her on offense so that you can properly utilize the second part of her signature ability. But yeah, again, hopefully, there still is a possibility, right? You know, what if it ends up not being a Princess Pride stat clone and she'll end up having more base attack? And yeah, I do think she could be elevated to like a really, really powerful sweeper at that rate. But yeah, that's all I got. I'm all milked out. I just ended up talking about her for a really long time because I do think there's a lot of potential here just based on the signature ability. But again, we do have to, at the end of the day, we have to be, or not we, because I'm the one making the fucking videos. I have to be responsible with my discussions here. I do, at the end of the day, have to correlate these signature abilities with their base stats to come to a proper conclusion, which we don't really have yet. So again, take these discussions with a grain of salt, okay? These are just first impressions and mostly just looking at the signature ability in a vacuum. When I'm discussing base stats and everything, these are just like more of like theory crafted scenarios based off like, you know, other players' extrapolations on what their base stats might look like, okay? Alright, so before I ramble on about High Ruler for another hour, let's quickly move on to the last variant. Alright, so finally we have Wetwork, who is a water type natural diamond Valentine variant. Her signature ability is called Aerial Rave. So this signature ability gives her evasion every 2 seconds while charging a charge attack. And when knocking an opponent into the air, Valentine gains enrage and the opponent suffers armor break and death mark for 4 seconds. Okay, so when maxed out, so take note, when the signature abilities are maxed out, she gains evasion every 1 second while charging a charge attack. And for the second half of her signature ability, instead of 4 seconds, it's 7 seconds. Okay, just take note. Okay, so this fighter overall is fucking insane. Like, oh my god. This one's really, really, really strong. Like, it's in a different way from how High Ruler is strong. Because, like, High Ruler has a nuts signature ability, but just like the impending, like, how should I say, like, inevitability that she would end up being a Princess Pride stat clone, it could hold her back a bit, right? Like, crazy signature ability, but with the 8,500 base attack stat line, it could hold her back. Wetwork probably doesn't have that problem. There's a very good chance that Wetwork does not have this problem because, okay, first of all, according to Melon, she has a very unique stat line. She doesn't seem to be a stat clone of any other variant in the game so far, so it's anyone's guess. But even then, Wetwork is a natural diamond, so her base stats are going to be really high. So high base stats combined with this kind of signature ability, it's pretty nuts. Like, not broken. I will say for the record that none of these variants are anywhere near broken, but they are, like, you know, High Ruler and Wetwork in particular are very, very strong. And Wetwork more clear-cut. I do think Wetwork's power level in this scenario is a bit more clear-cut simply because she's a natural diamond. And, let's say they mess up and end up giving her a lot of HP and not that much attack. Like, she's a water type and she can stack evasion. That would make her a very, very spooky defender. Right? So, no matter where the stats end up skewing, like, she's really, really good. Wow. And honestly, to me, the deciding factor here, outside of the obvious stat distribution, like, of course, we want her to have a very high base attack. Hopefully higher than Tress. It would be, like, pretty amazing if we have, like, our first Valentine that breaks, like, the 13,000 base attack mark. That would be crazy. It wouldn't be broken, honestly. The one thing that could make her coats, air quotes, broken is actually the evasion. Like, if you've seen me on stream fool around with Snakebite, wherein I just get into hype mode and just, become unkillable via evasion stacking, if Wetwork can do something similar by adjusting her play patterns, by incorporating more charge attacks, wow. I do think she will be a top-notch attacker. Like, one of the best in the game. She has that potential. But again, I can't say that for certain because I don't know what her base attack is gonna look like. And again, like, 1 second per evasion stack might not be a lot. Okay, so for perspective, if you've used heavy-handed, how she stacks and rage with her charge attacks, that's 0.1. Okay, so this is 10 times slower. So yeah, this is something I hope I get her. Of all the variants, I do want Wetwork the most, just so I could test the practical applications of her signature ability, like the evasion portion of her signature ability in particular. I'm very much looking forward to it. So yeah, that's all I got. So yeah, those are my first impressions on the 3 new variants that are still unavailable for players. Okay, again, it's unavailable for players. You can only see them in holodeck, in AI battles. So yeah, those are my first impressions. I ended up talking way longer than I should have. I'm really sorry about that. I hope you guys learned something. Thanks for watching, guys, and that's a wrap.